This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Shlomo Hyman, one of the earliest Rosh Yeshiva and Yeshiva Tarvadas, he would recall with great emotion the one year he had the opportunity to say Selichos in the Yeshiva of the Chafetz Chaim. Chafetz Chaim hired as a Rosh Yeshiva the Granat, Hagoyin Rav Naftali Trop. And Rav Shlomo Hyman actually was primarily the student of Rabbi Baruch Ber Leibowitz, where he learned by Rabbi Baruch Ber for at least 12 years. He was a Talmud Muvak of Rabbi Baruch Ber. Rav Shlomo Hyman actually lived a very short life. Rav Shlomo came to America in the early 30s, and he learned as a student of Rabbi Baruch Ber. After his marriage, he actually was invited to give shiur in Kamenetz. So at the time, this was before World War I, so Kamenetz was on the move actually when the war began. So the yeshiva was wandering from Slobodka to Kremenchug, and at the time Rav Shlomo Hyman, one of the prized disciples of Rabbi Baruch Ber, was drafted by the Russian army. And he's in the front lines of the Russian army, he's in the trenches. And actually, Rabbi Shlomo Hyman was able to chazer the entire Masechta Ksubas in the trenches on the front line for the Russian army. World War I is over. He's invited to give shiur in Baranovich in 1928. And then ultimately he's a Maggid shiur in Vilna under Reb Chaim Ozer. But for one short year, Rabbi Shlomo Hyman comes to the Granatz Yeshiva, Chafetz Chaim's Yeshiva, and he was zoicha to hear Divrei Hisoyrus from Hagon Rav Naftali Trop. Rav Naftali got up at the behest of the Chafetz Chaim, and Rav Naftali said the following. We say in Selichos, Kedalim ucharashim dafaknu delasecha. Like paupers, like poor man, we bang on your door. What exactly does it mean, Kedalim ucharashim dafaknu delasecha? So the Granat said that from this line in the Selichos, we learn out that there's a major misconception when it comes to the Yom Noram. Many of us feel that when we stand before the Ribono Shel Olam on Rosh Hashanah, we have a lot in our pocket. We say to Ribono Shel Olam, look, I have a job, I have a family, I have money, I have my health, I have life, that's mine. That's in my back pocket. I'm the muchzak. I have a presumptive status on everything. So Ribono Shel Olam, all you need to do this year is just butt out. Just keep out of my business. And I'll keep everything that I have. I have my life. I have my family. I have my money. So just keep it that way. I am a muchzak on everything that I have. But this in fact is not true. We say, Kedalim ucharashim dafaknu delasecha. We stand before the Ribono Shel Olam like poor men. In other words, when Rosh Hashanah comes, the lease is over. The lease is up. We're not asking God to extend the lease. We're asking the Ribono Shel Olam to renegotiate the lease. We're saying to the Ribono Shel Olam, don't continue my life, but I stand before you like a mess, without life, and I ask you to resuscitate me. I stand before you without a job, and I ask you to find me one. I stand before you without a family, and I ask you to provide me with one in the year Tafshin Pei. As the Gemara tells us in Rosh Hashanah on Daf Tezayin on the Pasuk, Mereishis Hashana ad Achras Shana. The Gemara says, Kol Shana Sharash B'tchilasa Misasheres B'Seifa. Any year that is humble and contrite in the beginning will be successful in the end of the year. Shenamar Mereishis Hashana Milashon Rosh. That if we begin the year with humility, then we have a chance at the end of the year will be successful. Says Rav Naftali Trop, the objective is to stand before Ribono Shel Olam on Rosh Hashanah, Selichos, Yom Naram, with genuine humility and with a feeling of a Leiv Nishbar, of a Leiv Nidka. The Maggid of Trisk, who lived from 1806 to 1889, he was a scion of the Chernobyl dynasty. So he had many Talmidim who would come to hear his shiurim, his advice, his eitzos. And one year he is surrounded by his Talmidim. It's the first night of Sukkot. And the Talmidim, they want to see what is it like when the Rebbe comes into the Sukkah for the first time. What does it feel like? They wanted to experience the aura of Kedusha. And they follow the Maggid, they're tailing behind the Maggid, and the Maggid is about to come into the sukkah. And as Rabbi Avramallah, the Maggid of Trisk, is about to enter the sukkah, he stops dead in his tracks. And so to speak, he cannot enter the sukkah. He feels that there's a deterrent from him entering the sukkah. So Talmidim are worried. They think maybe the Rebbe took ill suddenly. Maybe the Rebbe feels there's a psul in the sukkah, and the schach, and the walls. Maybe something's bothering the Rebbe. But nobody dared to move. Nobody dared to ask the Rebbe why he's not entering the sukkah. And after a while, one of the Talmidim could not contain himself, so he turns to the Rebbe and he says, Rebbe, please tell me what's bothering you. Why are you not able to enter the sukkah? So the Rebbe said very simply, in the Yom Kippur davening we say that an Adam is mashal kecheres hanishbar. We're like a piece of earthenware. We say, Ki hine kachomer b'yad hayoytzer. Behold, like a piece of pottery in the hand of the craftsman. We're like a piece of cheres. But there's a halacha in Hilchos Sukkah that you're not allowed to bring a kli cheres into a sukkah. So if we're in fact like a kli cheres, if we're like a piece of earthenware, we're not permitted to go into the sukkah. How dare we enter the sukkah? The Maggid says that's why I can't enter the sukkah. If we take these words seriously, if we're really like a kli cheres, we can't go in. But the Maggid says that there's one eitzah, there's one way to get into the sukkah. There's one way that if you have a piece of pottery that's tameh, there's one way to be matayar the piece of pottery. And that is, the Mishnah says in Kalim, Parak Beis, Mishnah Aleph, that kli cheres hanishbar tahar, that if you break a piece of pottery, that it's rendered pure. Says the Maggid of Trisk, if we're able to shatter our arrogance, our gaiva, our ego, then as David HaMelech says, Leiv nishbar v'nidke elikim leisivzeh. And thus the Maggid of Trisk, surrounded by his Talmidim, entered the sukkah with genuine feelings of anivus and shiflas. Kol shana sharasha b'tchilasa misasheres b'soifa. One of the old-time great Mekubalim was the Baal HaLeshem, Shlomo Elyashiv, the grandfather of the previous Pesach Hadar, Rabbi Yosef Shalom Elyashiv. And in the Hakdama to one of the Chalakim of the Leshem, there's a small biography on the Leshem written by Rabbi Aryeh Levine. Rabbi Aryeh was a Talmud of the Leshem. Rabbi Aryeh was privileged to be at the Kavura of the Leshem on Har HaZisim. By the way, Rabbi Aryeh Levine writes that when he was there at his Kavura, had the opportunity actually to be at the Leshem's kever a number of times. The Rabbi Aryeh Levine writes that at the moment that the Leshem was placed into the ground, a supernatural rainbow appeared in the sky, and everybody who raised their eyes to the sky saw this light emanating from Shemayim. And one year, Rabbi Aryeh Levine writes, he came into the shul where the Leshem was davening, and he saw how the Leshem was preparing himself for the first night of Selichos. He stood, the Baal HaLeshem stood with his head bowed, with his hands folded, with his knees shaking back and forth. And the Leshem was visibly concentrating, visibly moved, visibly troubled. And Rabbi Aryeh Levine was sitting next to the Leshem, so to speak, looking at his Rebbe, begging for an explanation. And Rabbi Elyashiv shared a very penetrating story. He says that in one of the older Talmidim of Chaim Volozhiner, the Sefer Menucha Kedusha, he was a very holy soul, but a very poor man. He had no ways to support his family, so he would sell tchachkalach to support his family. And he would travel to various cities, sometimes to foreign countries, but he always made sure to be back for the first night of Selichos. But one year, the Menucha Kedusha built up significant debt. He knew he couldn't enter Rosh Hashanah owing people money, so he had a lot of business to conduct. And he wasn't sure if he would make it back for the first night of Selichos. He tried. He was successful in getting the last wagon back, and already in middle of Selichos, he runs into the shul, and the Chazan had already said the words, L'cha Hashem hatzdaka v'lanu boishes hapanim. And this tzaddik, the Menucho Kedusha, he's standing there before the Ribbon Shalom. And he says to Ribbon Shalom, Ribbon Shalom, I am a Baal Choiv to so many creditors. I owe so many people money. But more than anything else, I'm a debtor to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I owe you so much. How short I fall in my avodas Hashem to you. This tzaddik was so ashamed in front of the Ribbon Shalom. He was so embarrassed in front of the Ribbon Shalom. He couldn't lift his head up. Thinking about how Ezra HaSofer says, and we say this in the Selichos, Ezra HaSofer Oimer, Elokai, Boishti v'gam nechlamti laharim Elokai panay elecha. Literally, the tzaddik could not lift up his head. He was so embarrassed. He was so painfully ashamed in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He could not lift up his head. And the Leshem would say that every year when he comes to Selichos, he tries to recapture that moment when he saw this tzaddik literally not be able to lift up his head in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, feeling in debt, feeling indenture to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How far we are from these madregos. We say the words, Ribbon Shalom, I cannot lift up my face before you. Do we really feel that way? Do we have any feelings of shame? Do we have any feelings of humility? Let's talk about humility in general. You know, we come to shul 3 times a day, and we say a lot of words. We say hundreds of words. We say thousands of words. We turn many, many pages. What are we trying to accomplish? So we spoke out this morning that one of the primary functions of tefillah is to have some form of gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the Chovos HaLevavos writes there's another essential dimension of tefillah. There's another critical ingredient that we could say that if you don't experience this, you didn't do anything. You didn't accomplish anything. Chovos HaLevavos writes in the Shar Cheshbon HaNefesh, in Perek Gimel, Chovos HaLevavos writes, V'roi l'cha achi sheteda, my brother, you should know, Ki kavanosenu batfila eina kiyim. Our purpose in davening is one of the following objectives. In other words, if you don't accomplish this, you didn't daven. Number 1, Kiyim kalois hanefesh el holikim. Purpose of davening, it's the expression of the yearning of the soul to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, you came to shul. I came the moment it started, and I left the moment it was over. But at no point in my davening did I feel the expression of my soul yearning for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you didn't do anything. You did nothing. You just rattled off words. Chovos HaLevavos continues. There's another function of davening. Kniyasa lefanav. Humility before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Humility before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is the central function of the tefillah. To stand before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, recognizing we are utterly dependent on Him. What is the most frequent word we say in tefillah? Baruch, not Baruch. If you say Baruch, you said it incorrectly. There's no word in tefillah, Baruch. It's Baruch, it's a milra. Baruch. What does Baruch mean? What does the word Baruch mean? Blessed. What does that mean? Where does the word come from? The word Baruch comes from the word Berach, ni. The word Baruch means we bow in humility before you. We bow in humility before you. And even though we're only enjoined by the halacha to bow at specific intervals, but mentally we bow before HaKadosh Baruch Hu every time we make a bracha. Every time we say the word Baruch. In other words, a tefillah which is not accompanied by feelings of humility is not a tefillah. A baruch with that which is not accompanied by a mental bow before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that I humble myself before you, is not a baruch. Rav Shlomo Hyman also pointed out another very poignant insight into the tefillah. We say the night of Rosh Hashanah, Tiku b'chodesh shofar b'kesel liyom chagenu. We say about Rosh Hashanah that it's Bakesa. Why do we refer to Rosh Hashanah as Bakesa? The hidden day. What's hidden about Rosh Hashanah? There are many Perushim. It's a day the moon is still hidden. But Rav Shlomo Hyman would say over from Rav Itzla Peterburg. Bakesa. When Rosh Hashanah comes, every person is given a package, a box. And the box contains the outcome of the upcoming year. It contains our fate for the upcoming year. Will it be a Shnas Chayim? Will it be a year of peace of mind? A year of tranquility? A year of success? A year of Parnasa? It's hidden. It's sealed. No one knows the outcome. No one knows what the year has in store. It's a box that has dynamite in it. It may be extraordinary success or the opposite. But we are totally and utterly dependent on Hashem. That's another dimension of the humility we have for the Yemei Hadin. Kol Shana Sharasha B'Tchilasa Misasharas B'Soifa. Humility is the pinnacle of achievement in the arena of Avodas Hashem, as Ramban writes, Shehi Mido Toiva Mikol HaMidos Toivos. It's the greatest attribute of all the Midos. And all suffering, misfortune, difficulty, Rav Miller writes, the chief function of it, the objective of it, is to engender humility and an awareness and a deep recognition that we don't control our own fate and how our lives and everything we hope for are in the hands of Hashem. But there's a way to avoid suffering, misfortune, difficulty, and that is to gain humility through happiness. When a person studies the numerous blessings Hashem showers us with, the debt of gratitude makes us humble, where a person feels Ma Ashiv LaHashem Kol Tagmulai Alai. The more one considers how fortunate Hashem made him, the more overwhelmed by humility he is, the more a person seeks to repay Hashem with Avodas Hashem. A man like this needs no suffering. He's humbled by his happiness. The more one studies the blessings he possesses, the happier he becomes, and the happier he becomes, the humbler he becomes. And thus he is exempted from the necessity of suffering. This was the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu. Haboreach min hakavod, kavod boreach acharav. We say in the Anim Zmirois, Kesher Tefillin Hera La'anav. This revelation, the Rebbe Shalom showed to Moshe the knot of his tefillin because he was humble. Uzachar lahanu hayayim brish leishesrei kimai shahaydata la'anav, like Hashem taught Moshe, the humble one. May the Rebbe Shalom grant us a year full of bracha. May we only be humbled by the brachas of the Rebbe Shalom. We should be zoichet to come before the Rebbe Shalom, b'maitzai menucha, b'leiv nishbar v'nidka. And with that, we will be confident that Alikim Leisivzeh, may the Rebbe Shalom be makabel all of our tefillos, v'rachamim u'v'ratzain.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.